Welcome back to the Social Work Race podcast. I'm keeping it simple. My footprint is small and I'm holding this little mic because it's just easy. Do you know what I mean? So look, I want to thank you for joining me again. We are on what episode, man? Maybe 106 of the Social Work Race podcast. There's so much to learn. It's not just me giving the information. I'm having a lot of interviews. So whilst I'm blowing a trumpet, it's a trumpet of my previous guests that make this podcast interesting. So please, there's so much to learn. Go back. It is legitimate, continual professional development. You can use this as a resource. And the names of my guests as well, some of whom who are service users, most of whom are professionals in the field, in the field of social care, youth justice, health, and so forth. Go back and listen to all of those episodes. There's a lot to learn. This was also really designed as a resource for social workers and a platform for their voices. It's been an awesome experience. Today, I wanted to talk to you about 3 tips for social work assessment. All right. Here we go. Tip number 1. Let's keep it simple. Let's hit this, right? Okay. Tip number 1. When you are given an assessment to do on a family, your priority should be to your engagement priority should be to build a relationship with the people that you are working for. Remember, we are working for them. Even if they are guilty of something, we are there to support and we are working for them. And so your approach should be to build a relationship, because it's on that foundation that we are helping them get to a better place. Ultimately, that's what we want to do. So often people think that we just pull children out of families. Do we take children out of families? Not necessarily. We don't do that, but we may suggest it to the courts, Excuse me. We may suggest that, and people think that we're trying to break families down. Actually, we're trying to pull them together. Really, in my experience, I haven't had the opportunity to remove a child from a family, and I use that term as if I do, but I don't, or suggest the removal of a child. But I can say that my job is ultimately to bring a family together, and it's based on the relationship that we have with that family that determines whether that's possible or not sometimes. So remember that you've got the assessment in front of you and you've read up on the risks and concerns and the needs. Your job is really to to support them coming together and to reduce the imminency of anyone being pulled out of a family. Remember that. The second thing I wanted to give you was that we must use a strengths-based approach. All right. Now, part of that relationship building is to, point number 2, build on their strengths as a family, which means that you aren't looking at them as just risk, but you're looking at them as something which is protective as well. How can I use what their strengths are and how can I identify them? Well, the only way you're really going to do that is if you ask questions. A lot of times we will get a referral through in children's services, and maybe even adults. I don't work in adults, but I'm guessing that might be the case. And the referral may only have the risks and concerns. And you're looking at the family as, on paper, they might look a mess and it's not right. But I've often found, in fact, more often, I've found that what's on paper is just the concerns. I've said this before in previous podcasts. And it may not seem that there's a possibility of any strengths in that family, but you don't know until you get to see that family. You go in a home. Secondly, then you ask questions. Tell me about you. Tell me about your family. Ask the children how they're relating to the family. And maybe it may be necessary for you to ask, because not in all cases will you be asking the children about the concerns, because they may not be aware of them. Have I got some mess on me? Yes, I do. Must be from some snack. Yeah. So what we do is we will address appropriately the concerns and risks, but you do it in a strengths-based approach. So you say to the family, this is what we've seen. What do you think about it? And tell me about you. Tell me about your relationship with your children or yourself or your family, other family members, whatever strengths do we have in that family? Well, I've got a really good, strong family network. Yeah. So we draw on that. We say to mum or dad, like, you've got a good relationship with your child, but your child isn't listening. Well, let's build on that relationship. Let's see what we can do. Maybe we'll get a family practitioner to support you or a youth worker. So you're putting on the strengths. You're putting on the strengths of the fact that they've got a good relationship with maybe a professional at school. You also want to find something positive about the family, and that comes through asking questions, a bit of humor. Relationship building is connected to point number one, which is building a relationship, but you've got to dig for that. And to be honest with you, that means that you have to care about who you're working for, right? So that's it. The third point I want to give you is prepare. I have to read it. Prepare and don't fear the assessment. Okay, let me read this point to you. According to the Department for Education, it's important to prepare for the assessment and not to fear the word assessment. Yeah. So sometimes you'll get one that comes through and you're like, how and where do I start with this family or child or whoever it is or this adult? Don't fear it. You've just got to prepare for it. All right. And remember, you won't know a lot until you step through the door. Let me read on. Social workers can reach out to their managers for support and give themselves enough time to prepare. Remember, your manager is there to guide you when you're not sure. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. At some point, you're going to have to lean on someone higher than you to understand how to approach a case sometimes. Someone like me, I like to go it alone. I like to go in and just dive in the deep end, which has its pros and cons, but I often, even if I have a little bit of fear or a concern about how I'm going to approach a family, I will prepare. And a lot of that preparation for me is around how am I going to make that first phone call? And that first phone call sometimes comes with a lot of apprehension and frustration from the family. They don't want to talk to me, there's attitude, or they're just saying, I don't want to be a part of the process. And I really want to build them into working with me. And so I'm trying to sell a partnership. And so I'm focused on how I'm going to do it. I'm preparing in my mind. How am I going to approach this family? What can I do to sell cooperation and participation? Yeah. The assessment is an opportunity to have a say and provide as much detail as possible about the person's needs and strengths. So the Department of Education is really saying to us is that if we remember what and why we're doing what we're doing with a particular family, then it helps us prepare a lot better. So, for example, if I have an assessment to do and the risks are high or it seems complex, taking a moment to just work out how I might approach this is helpful. But if you're not sure, you call on a manager. And even if you're still not sure, or if the manager's not available, speak to a colleague. In your job, there's always someone to help. And if you don't have that in your workplace, you're working in the wrong place. You can, if you want to, speak to management, or you can move on. I'm not necessarily encouraging people to move on from their jobs. I'm just saying, if you're not in an environment where you can do your job, what do you do? And you have to make that decision. It's your choice. I would say speak to a colleague always. There's always, and if it's not in your team, another team. Ask for advice or support. You have to do that in social work. You cannot do social work by yourself. And sometimes when you have an assessment or a family, there may be triggers in those referrals that might remind you of something about your past. And that can be a challenge. So it's always worth talking to someone about how you might approach it. Where I work in my team, we all talk about our cases all the time. Not every single case, but we're always communicating, especially when we're on duty. We are always talking about the case that we're going to work. And someone always gives us a tip. It doesn't matter about your experience. We all have areas of development, from the students to the newly qualified to those doing the ASYE. I have colleagues doing the ASYE that are giving me tips because they have experience also, of course. So I never approach social work or a case as if I know it all. I don't. In fact, the more I learn is the more I realize I don't know. And that's a part of the preparation. It's saying, what don't I know? And where can I get support from? That's a part of the preparation. So it decreases the fear. My colleagues then will give me pointers, and those pointers now help me to remove the fear and apprehension out of my approach. I hope this helps. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm on YouTube, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram. Have I forgotten any? I don't know. And all podcasting platforms. Hope this helps. Take care of yourselves.